So we're going to start off with Meshuggah, and we're going to start with their second album. It was called Destroy, Erase, Improve. It came out all the way back in 1995 when I wasn't even a year old. I was a wee bubba. They play, if you are somehow unfamiliar with Meshuggah, they play a extreme progressive metal style of music, which inevitably, or would later on create a brand of music called djent. And if you are anywhere familiar with alternative music, you will know exactly what djent is, kind of. You will know of the scene, you will know bands like Periphery, Veil of Maya, Tesseract, Born of Osiris, kind of, etc., etc. Um, so this Destroy Erase Improve would be the first album to have Morten Hagstrom brought into the fold. He took up rhythm guitar roles. And as someone who first heard about this kind of music from the ensuing djent movement, like I said before, Periphery, Tesseract, Animals as Leaders, Chimp's Banner, that kind of thing, I thought that this would be a really interesting way to find out where that all started. Because obviously, in between Meshuggah and Sixth, these are the precursor for that movement. And I thought, yeah, it'd be really interesting to find out, like, knowing what I know now and trying to work backwards, I guess. Um, Having said that, my initial thought from listening to Destroy and Improve is that I don't know of a band throughout the djent hemisphere that sounds anything like this iteration of Meshuggah. Like my first Meshuggah album that I properly looked into was Kolos in 2012. And with that album, I can definitely hear where a lot of people take influence from because it does have a very similar djent style makeup. But in terms of this era Meshuggah, the band that began with V that I can never pronounce, Villagata, I believe they're called, that maybe be the closest. But I only discovered them like after writing the review. But I think this kind of techie, almost death metal kind of thing is like incomparable with nearly 100% of the djent bands that I'm remotely aware of. Um, the off kilter, what is going to happen next style riffing that is quite common. It is here. It's in abundance straight from the off. The opening song, Future Breed Machine, has about 6 different riffs before the chorus kicks in. But the one thing that I found was that the riffs on here just roll one after another. There's no like transition lick. There's very few like stop start breaks. It is just riff after riff after riff after riff. They don't stop coming and they don't stop coming. And it just helps the flows and songs. Like the album as a whole can be quite difficult because of the erratic time signature changes, and it's almost mathcore in that regard. But take each song separately as an individual item of music, and the chord riff progressions feel almost natural because of the way Frederick Thorndale just like can seamlessly transition from one to the other to the other. And I see a lot of reviews refer to Thorndale's guitar playing. It's really easy to see why. They like double tap riffs that he's got throughout the album, and they play off Thomas Hark's drums and Peter Norden's bass line so well, and the tone in between everything just sits in a limbo that is beyond heavy metal of the time. You think this was 1995? This was just, it was in the middle of grunge. It was just before nu metal. It was like, let's face it, outside of things like Pantera and not much else. Maybe Machine Head. I can't think when Burn My Eyes came out, but as a whole, 90s metal was kind of on its ass. But it was like the tone that Thorndale had was beyond the metal of the time, and it's still not very much like what we hear today. It was a very unique like style and very unique I guess interpretate. No, interpretation is a shit word. I just say it's a unique version of heavy metal compared to what was around then and what is still around now. Because I can't think of a better word to think of. And as weird as it is for me to say, for a album like this by a band like this, my favorite parts in this album is the simplicity. So many gent bands today have like treacle thick production jobs, and like I will be the first to say I love high end production albums, but it is to excessive amounts on a lot of gent bands these days. They have so much going on in the background. They have samples, they have guitar and vocal effects, they've got excessive layering. Whereas this is so to the bone that at this stage of Meshuggah's career, I would not label them part of that genre yet. For me, this is more of an avant-garde, progressive death metal record. The most traditional gent song off the album will probably be the closing track, Sublevels. It is very slow, ambience-driven. It has, a very slow, ambience-backed riff. It's a very mood-heavy kind of song, but for the rest of the album, it is when they want to do the like spooky noises in the background, they give it its own separate track called Asridge or Acrid. Asridge, I'll keep with. Placidity, track 6. Fuck you. It just wants to be a metal record, which is what it is. For me, it's kind of a weird one because this is not the sort of music I go for, hence why I can't talk. But I do think anyone who's got even like the most fleeting interest in heavy music, especially modern heavy music, they should go and they should listen to this because it inspired an entire generation of musicians and artists. Both, it wasn't accidentally inspired what ended up becoming gent. But even though it expired, gent, Destroy Erase Improve is still still very different and very unique compared to what it has spawned. Since the album came out, Meshuggah have largely stayed with the lineup. Jens Kidman on vocals. Fredrik Thorndahl is the iconic guitarist on leads. Like I said, Martin Hegstrom, who joined for this album, he's still around. He's still kicking. He's still lovely. And Thomas Hark was the drummer, still is. The only thing that Meshuggah have a problem doing is keeping hold of a bassist. I think they're doing a pretty good job now, but at the time, the bassist for the album, Peter Norden, would leave the band shortly afterwards, citing medical reasons. His replacement, Gustav Heilm, he initially joined as a session member and would eventually stay with Meshuggah until 2001. He left for undisclosed reasons. Excuse me. He has since, he currently plays in a psychobilly band called Badge, a melodic death metal outfit called Non-Human Level, and has recently joined a prog rock band, Pain of Salvation. A permanent bassist was eventually found to replace Haim in 2004 in the shape of former Cromlech and Armageddon bassist Dick Lövgren, who is still part of the band. For the fans off part, I haven't put anyone purely because, like I keep saying, this is a very unique sounding record. As much as it did inspire a complete wave of music, I think it stands alone compared to any of those guys. So if you just like angry, aggressive, progressive music, you won't do much worse than Destroy, Erase, Improve, the second album from 1995 by Umeå, Sweden. I forgot the word. Natives. There we go. Meshuggah.